Why does a dad throw his baby straight up into the air, laughing, while the mom across the room is already halfway out of her chair? Neither one of them is wrong. Both of them are running an ancient program, and they just happen to be running two completely different versions of it. Picture the scene. It's ordinary, almost boring in how often it happens. A father lifts his baby overhead, tosses it a few inches into the air, catches it, and does it again. The baby shrieks with laughter. The father grins. And somewhere nearby, a mother tenses up like she's watching a car crash in slow motion. This isn't a personality difference. It isn't one parent being careless and the other being sensible. It's two separate evolutionary strategies, both real, both old, both still running exactly as designed. Here's the part most people never think to ask. Why does this specific pattern show up so consistently across so many families that it's become a cultural joke instead of a mystery? Research on parental play styles keeps finding the same basic pattern. Fathers, on average, engage in more physical, high-energy, unpredictable play. Mothers, on average, engage in more soothing, controlled, predictable interaction. Neither approach is better. They appear to be doing two different jobs. A parent who rocks, soothes, and keeps an infant's environment calm and predictable is teaching one crucial lesson. The world can be trusted to feel safe. That lesson matters enormously. Infants who don't get enough of it can struggle with regulation and security well into later life. But there's a second lesson an infant also needs, and it can't be taught the same way. That lesson is this: an unexpected jolt, a sudden drop, a moment of physical uncertainty is not automatically a catastrophe. Something can feel momentarily out of control and still turn out fine. This is where the tossing comes in. That brief second of controlled unpredictability, held safely by a strong pair of hands the entire time, appears to function as a kind of practice run. Practice for tolerating uncertainty. Practice for controlling fear response instead of being controlled by it. Practice that soothing, predictable play simply isn't built to provide. Researchers who study this kind of rough physical play, sometimes called rough-and-tumble play, have found it's associated with better emotional regulation later in childhood, along with stronger skills in reading social cues during rapid, high-energy interaction. The wrestling, the chasing, the being flipped upside down and caught isn't wasted energy. It's a rehearsal space. This pattern shows up across cultures that have almost nothing else in common. Anthropologists studying fathers in societies with very different economies, religions, and family structures keep noticing the same rough, physical, high-arousal play style showing up specifically in fathers, far more consistently than it shows up in mothers in those same communities. When a behavior appears this reliably across such different environments, it's rarely a coincidence of culture. It's usually a sign that something deeper and older is driving it. And here's the uncomfortable question worth sitting with. If a controlled dose of risk is actually good for a developing nervous system, why does it still feel so alarming to watch? The mother's reaction isn't irrational either. It's running its own separate, equally old logic. This isn't a uniquely human pattern either. Rough physical play between young mammals and adult males shows up across many species, from young primates wrestling with older males to juvenile animals engaging in mock combat that looks dangerous but rarely results in real injury. Researchers who study animal behavior generally interpret this kind of play as practice for exactly the skills that matter later: judging force, reading another body's intentions in real time, and recovering quickly from a moment of physical surprise. Humans didn't invent this strategy. We inherited a very old one already running in other species long before we showed up. For most of human history, a caregiver's instinct to minimize risk to an infant was correct almost all of the time. Falls, drops, sudden impacts, these were genuine threats with no margin for error. A caregiver wired to react strongly to any sign of physical risk near a vulnerable infant was a caregiver whose children were more likely to survive long enough to grow up. So when a mother tenses at the sight of a baby flying a few inches into the air, she isn't overreacting to nothing. She's running a threat detection system built across an almost unimaginable stretch of evolutionary time, one that evolved to treat any airborne infant as a potential emergency first and sort out the details second. Both instincts are correct. They're just optimized for different failure modes. The father's instinct is optimized to prevent an infant from growing up too fragile to handle an uncertain world. The mother's instinct is optimized to prevent an infant from ever experiencing the one uncontrolled moment that actually goes wrong. Neither one is running the complete picture alone. Together, they cover both sides of a single problem no one instinct could solve by itself. This is, in a sense, a built-in checks and balances system. A father running purely on his own instinct, with no counterweight at all, might push physical risk further than an infant is actually ready for. A mother running purely on her own instinct, with no counterweight at all, might shield a child from every uncertain moment long enough to leave them unprepared for a world that will eventually contain some. Neither extreme produces the best outcome. The friction between the two instincts, uncomfortable as it feels in the moment, is often what keeps both of them calibrated. Now, here's the second moment worth pausing on. If two people can look at the exact same 3 seconds of airborne baby and each be following a real, functional survival strategy, how many other parenting disagreements are actually the same story? Not one correct instinct and one wrong one, but two old systems built to specialize in different risks. There's a detail in this dynamic that rarely gets mentioned, and it reframes the whole scene. The father isn't ignoring risk during the toss. He's the one holding the entire variable steady. His hands control the height, the timing, the catch. From the outside, it looks like chaos. From the inside, for him, it's a fully managed system, with exactly one point of failure, and that point of failure is entirely under his own control. The mother, watching from across the room, doesn't have access to that internal sense of control. She only sees the variable, a baby briefly airborne, gravity doing what gravity does, and no way from her vantage point to verify that the catch is coming. Which means the disagreement isn't really about how much danger actually exists. It's about who has direct control over that danger in that exact moment, and how differently that changes the felt experience of risk for two people watching the same 3 seconds unfold. This same pattern echoes forward long after childhood ends. Watch how differently people evaluate risk when they're the one driving versus the one in the passenger seat, even on the exact same road, at the exact same speed. Control changes the felt danger of a risk far more than the actual math of the danger ever does. The same asymmetry shows up on roller coasters, where the person who chose to ride often feels genuine thrill, while a nervous parent watching from the platform feels something closer to dread, both of them looking at the identical few seconds of motion. So the next time a dad tosses a baby overhead and a mom tenses up across the room, understand that you're not watching a disagreement about love or carelessness or who's the more responsible parent. You're watching two different, equally ancient survival strategies, each one calibrated for a real danger. The other one tends to underweight, running at exactly the same time, in the same living room, over the same 3 seconds of airborne laughter. The baby, caught safely every single time, ends up with something neither instinct could have built alone: proof that the world holds steady, and proof that a sudden jolt doesn't have to be the end of anything. If this ancient instinct still feels familiar, subscribe to Primeval Psyche. Here, we decode modern behavior through ancient survival. The next fear may be much older than you think.